So, do we have any questions for any of the speakers? Oh, yep, hello.
Yes. So my name is Asif, and I am doing Master in Corporate Law from Rural University. So, as you rightly mentioned, there is enough multipolar world. So, there is no single country that is going to create world order. So, against this perspective, if we look towards Asia, so many powers are emerging. So, instead of thinking about that unipolar world, I think it's my view that we should look towards our neighbors, because we can't choose not change our neighbors, but we can change our friends. So if we look towards Asian emerging powers like India, China, Russia, so and try to find the common grounds so that we can build relations with Asian countries. Like in Europe, they have a lot of differences, but again they are united because they have been able to find common grounds. So if we are able to find common grounds in Asia, so it will not be against Europe or in the American nation. So it will be just for the betterment of our own people and for the security of our nation.
Yeah, thank you. Who was that question for?
Yeah, well, as I hope I rather explained, I think for countries like Kazakhstan, you need to look at friends throughout the world. Those who have allied themselves to the great powers in the past have usually been disappointed because they've been uncertain allies. And I think both those who've supported Russia and those who supported the United States have learned to their cost that sometimes those relationships on which they rely haven't always been as strong as they had hoped. And I think that's why my theme was very much that middle powers now, like Kazakhstan, are looking to engage with as many different partners as possible and not actually seeking to go into a particular camp, one or the other. And although I regret a lot of the things that Mr. Modi has done in India, I think the way he has positioned India in a non-aligned way to a large extent is a significant achievement for the most populous democracy in the world. And I think there's a lot to learn from actually choosing your friends as and when you can, and hopefully you will then end up with ensuring that if you have so many friends, you actually diminish the number of enemies that you've got. But so much depends, and Ashraf talked about this, I touched upon it. So much depends about the nature of the public involvement in countries. Now, you can't have a Bolshevism, because that means by definition, the Mensheviks are the ones who are left out and not given any chance whatsoever. So you need a plural democracy. I've always been of the belief that the best way to achieve that is through a federal system, where you have government at the lowest level capable of achieving results for the people. So you have effective local government. And you reserve upwards to a higher authority only those issues which cannot be dealt with at that lower level. So you build from the bottom up rather than the top down. Far too often we've seen, particularly in countries that have been subject to autocratic rule, it has been the other way around. The autocratic ruler comes in and then starts to decide whether or not to devolve power out to the geographical regions, or indeed sometimes through ethnic divisions, not just geographical ones. The greatest way of bringing in popular involvement, because then everybody has a stake in the future, is to work from the bottom up. And I think if countries like Kazakhstan can learn that lesson, then they've got a very bright future indeed.
Yes, please.
My question goes to Mr. Ashraf. What do you think about Taliban regime in Afghanistan? Are they doing well? In the 4 years, there is no school, no work for women, and none of the countries officially have a relation with this government, and they help the region to rest. And what's your idea about that regime?
Well, you've described it, well, I'm not sure exactly what you want from me, but the point is that the Taliban are a protest movement. Many of you will know better than me because I'm not from that part of the world, although I've been in Afghanistan trying to fight the Taliban. The point is the Taliban came in to deal with problems, ironically, problems of sexual abuse against young boys and then against girls, but they have got a corrosive and very unstable idea of the world because it oscillates between Pashtunwali and also between Islam, and it doesn't do justice to either. And the problem there is also the fact that the Taliban are not a cohesive body of people ideologically. I was watching very carefully their statements as they came into power. By the way, for what it's worth, I predicted on Sky TV just about 6-7 days beforehand, it's not a question of when, but if, and the only reason I was able to do that was because I was able to speak to people on the ground in Afghanistan, in Kabul, who were telling me, yes, the Taliban have control. They're turning off and on access to Kabul just to let the people know we can come in anytime we like. All of this is being ignored by the government, and it all comes as a shock. The point is that the Taliban have developed as a bunch of warlords, and within them there are those that are, let's say, less liberal than others. And what I would expect is, as the time proceeds, they will start to fight themselves. All extremist organizations, and I've studied most of them, all of them implode. And they implode only when you allow them space to do this. As long as they have a common enemy, as long as people are saying, you know, we're going to fight the Taliban, they have a reason to unite. And the reason I mention this is that the Taliban, who were in Qatar negotiating for many years, were exposed to some of the most conservative Islamic societies in the world. The women observed further. But the same society, and again, not a lot of people know this, Qatar has the largest proportion of STEM qualified women in the world, right? And those women are running STEM organizations not as subordinates, but leading them with other Qatari men as their subordinates. So it was those people that were saying, yes, we're going to open up the schools and we're going to include women. And it's these other guys who were living in the borderlands, maybe from Pakistan, who were saying, no, we don't want to see women. We don't want to see them. And that is nothing except a very warped part of even Pashtunwali culture, because the real Pashtuns don't do this to their women. And you know, the women have a role. Maybe it's not the role that we would expect, but it is a self-determined role.
It means this is cultural matter. It is not in Islam to ban the women.
I just want to endorse what Ashraf is saying, because I mean, you know, students of the French Revolution will know exactly what he's just said is absolutely true. When they start fighting amongst themselves, that enabled Napoleon to come in and become emperor of Europe. And so wherever there is a vacuum, a strong person very often comes in. I think the Taliban will destroy themselves in the end, because as Ashraf was saying, I mean, you've got, certainly sitting in Kabul now, a lot of young Taliban whose experience has been over the last 20 years of liberalisation, of women being educated, women having positions in the judiciary, in government and things like that. you've got the old warlords in Kandahar and places like that who've got a totally different experience. And the trouble is, and I'm treading into delicate ground now because I'm not an Islamic scholar and I'm not a Muslim, but, and I'm not suggesting that Islam should have the equivalent of a papal figure overall. But one of the problems with Islam, and it's true I think within Afghanistan now, is that you can go from one imam in the road and get one interpretation of the Holy Quran and the Hadiths, and you go down the road to another one, you get totally different interpretations. Islam is necessarily fractured because of that. So you get lots of people claiming to be the true Islamic voice, when in fact that is grossly disputed by other, and you know, we heard it with the Ahmadis. I mean, I've been to meet the Ahmadis in Wimbledon, a big group of Ahmadis, as you know, in Surrey as well. A lot of them are here. And yet, you know, Section 298C of the Pakistan Code means that you know, they are subject to a capital offence for apostasy, because they do not recognise the Holy Prophet as the last prophet. And you know, these sort of divisions are ones that create mayhem and create a vacuum into which other less beneficent people can often walk.
But just to bring Central Asia into this as well, I mean, I think what you were talking about, the traditional, the fact that the Taliban were predominantly Pashtun dominated in the past, but I think for the last 3 years we've seen a change in that in Afghanistan, and you have lots of non-Pashtuns like the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, Hazaras also joining the Taliban now, and I think this will really change the dynamic.
Yes.
And then you've also got the Daesh, ISIS, using the fact that the Taliban is Pashtun to recruit other people.
Well, the majority of Pashtun is there.
The leadership is still
Yes.
Pashtun, but they're also recruiting other people to be their soldiers.
And you're pointing to a point that I didn't have time to cover, which I hinted at, that there are not just the ISIS, but there are, even in the last 2 or 3 weeks, new groups emerging on the borderlands. And particularly, not just between the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also between Pakistan and Iran. Now, there's a lot of geopolitics going on. These people don't just emerge, they don't just have weapons. Those weapons, in the case of ISIS in Iraq, were manufactured, and this is from the Conflict Armament Research Group, in Bulgaria, and took less than 10 days to arrive in Mosul in the hands of ISIS. I spoke to a friend who's an arms dealer in Bulgaria. I spoke to him in Bulgaria, and he said to me, off the record, yes, we had 2 contracts. One was public and the other was secret. And you can imagine what was happening with the secret contract. And so what you're pointing to is part of what I think you, sir, said, and also Nurym endorsed, is that there's a dangerous situation building up with people pulling strings who have an interest in instability. Because through instability, they can either gain prominence or at least stop any challenge to whatever oil or gems in the case of Afghanistan, other commodity they want to control. So it is a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
But I hope that sort of...
Thank you very much.
So we just have time for 2 more questions, because I can see that everyone is waiting for the food as well. So, yep.
My name is Anis Nasir. I'm a retired banker, but now I'm a concerned citizen of the world. Firstly, I'd just like to say congratulations to Dr. NASIMI, and that he created ACAA, which is doing fantastic work for the refugees. That's tremendous. Now, coming back to the question, everyone knows the world is in turmoil. On one hand, you have Islamist terrorism, which is obviously a danger to everybody, not only to Western countries, but their own people. And they have been inflicting the terror on their own populations in their own ideas. On the other hand, you have rearming of Europe going on at the moment, which is leading to is a definite recipe for Third World War, as Trump has said. Although everything he says, you can't take it for what it is worth. And on the other hand, it is happening now. The Western countries have handed Afghanistan back to Taliban on a plate, and same they have done in Iraq to a degree, same in Syria and Libya. Total destruction of civilizations, infrastructures. They are just playing this geopolitical game all around. Trump is doing it in a different way, economically, militarily, and so on. Now, the Muslim countries' leaders, they have always been disunited and totally indifferent to what is happening, inflicting horror onto their own citizens. Only if they can now stand up and be counted, and they are not. So I think a lot of talk has been done. I don't know what the speakers, our learned speakers, have touched on all aspects of the world geopolitical situation. So maybe they want to say, what is the solution now? Rearming of Europe, on the other hand, must stop now. Otherwise, it will lead all that weaponry that is being put into Europe, bearing in mind the First World War and Second World War started in Europe. It will happen again if they are not careful. On the other hand, you have Islamist terrorism, extremist fanatics who are prepared to do or die for anything. So what are the solutions? These people have to be...
And your name and position?
My name is Anis Nasir. I'm a retired banker.
Okay.
But I'm quite aware of what is going on, and I don't feel hesitation in
two more questions, and then we'll do it all in one go. Can you just keep it brief, please? Yep, sorry, you.
Hi, I'm working with the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Freedom of Religion or Belief in Parliament, and I was wondering if you have press releases that fully explain the current issues on the ground currently as they're happening, so that I can raise that awareness in Parliament.
Okay, I've noted all the questions in my mind. Yep.
Thank you. So, I'll say quickly, I'm not a student, I'm from a healthcare professional background, but I was also born in Kandahar in Afghanistan, so I've seen everything and I've educated myself in here in healthcare. Now, the question from my perspective is, my experience shows me there's only one victor in here, and that's the USA. And this is the keys again. So you said in your introduction, I think you said somewhere that one of the old prime ministers in the UK had said the same towards the US, and I think they're treating everybody the same way. So they're picking on certain Islamic countries or routes or regions to make essentially a problem there in order for them to be staying safe for themselves. Do you think that is
Okay.
the case?
Next, yep.
I'm not a student, I just listened to you. My question to the minister with the medal, he talked about Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I want to ask, Kazakhstan has a big border with Russia, and Russian authorities told that they claim that north of Kazakhstan is their territory. And I want to know, will the Russians can invade Kazakhstan as Ukraine?
Yeah. Okay, next.
I'm a student here. My question is to Mr. Nasimi. You talked about how bad the situation is in Afghanistan and stuff, but you didn't mention, or maybe I didn't catch up, what do you expect from the countries, nations of the world in your cause for Afghanistan? For example, you mentioned Turkey, a country that suffers from great inflation, horrible economy, and that is a home to 8 to 13 million Syrian, Afghan, and Iraqi refugees. For example, what do you expect from that country?
From Turkey.
Turkey and the countries of the world.
Okay. Next on this side. No, Pratici is anyways working for ACA. Yep.
My question is,
You can be the last.
he in his speech president, just like instead of stormwater.
Sorry, what is applicable?
Mr. Ashraf.
Critical thinking.
Okay. Yeah, so let's just go through them one by one. So I think the first two questions by the gentleman at the back, and then the other one was about, and your question about geopolitics and fight. Do you think that, yeah, the West is like causing conflicts in other parts of the world for their own security? And yeah, who wants to answer that one? Okay?
All right, I hope you asked a critical question to which nobody has the answer, because if they did, they would now be getting the Nobel Peace Prize, we'd be a very happy place.
So I'm really sorry, I'm really desperate, because whatever sir has mentioned was impeccable, and I genuinely believe that he also touches a lot upon the political propaganda and how the Western media has always, because Ashraf sir has also mentioned a lot about propaganda, political propaganda, war propaganda, and how misinformation can accelerate to an extent that people start cannot interpret what is right and what is wrong. So sometimes there's so much media coverage of events which is false, and how do we tackle to that, because I feel like we can relate, the questions can be merged a lot.
Okay. The next question was, I think I can answer your question about the press releases. So we, as a charity, we always have press releases. So did you mean to say that you can then pass on the press release to the APPG?
Yes.
Yeah?
We can create events, we can hold debates, and I write.
Maybe we can do another similar conference at the Parliament as well. Which APPG was it?
The Freedom of Religion of Belief.
Okay, yeah.
These issues, because they're
Thank you for coming today. I've got, the other question was 2 questions to Dr. Nasimi, and then the third one was for Dr. Ashraf. So for Dr. Nasimi, I think there was one question about Kazakhstan and how the, do you think that Russia will invade Kazakhstan? And the second question was about Turkey. What do we want from Turkey and from other countries? How do we want them to treat people from Afghanistan?
You know, sometimes we need to take serious, especially when the leaders of the world mentioning something. For example, when Trump met Zelensky, they touched on the Third World War. And this is my feeling for the past maybe 3-4 years. Within my family, while I'm not the US president, my son is the evidence that we are talking about the possibility. Why? Because the First World War started in 1914 from the EU. Yeah? Then the Second World War in 1939. So the gap between the First World War and the Second World War was only 27 years. But the gap between the Second World War until now is a huge, 79 years now. Yeah. This is one thing. There is a possibility, because when Trump said that he was telling Zelensky about the possibility of the Third World War. About the Taliban, for example, I knew that the Taliban will return back to power in 2010, which everyone maybe become astonished how Dr. Nasimi knew that the Taliban will come back in 2010, because the EU hosted a conference on Afghanistan, the peace conference. And I was there, and I criticized the German foreign minister. He got upset. He said, "Oh, you don't want peace in your country." But I said, "I want peace, but I don't think that we can have a peace with the Taliban." So 15 years ago, I knew that the Taliban will return back to power. About the Turkish and then the wider community, the Russian invasion, of course, the last telephone call with Trump and Putin, and the less support from the EU for the past 3 years to Ukraine. This is a very dangerous situation that Russia maybe increase its influence over the Central Asian Caucasus and Baltic. That's why I saw Prince William. He's visited the British troops in Estonia yesterday. Yes, and that's it. We, for example, from Afghanistan, from Kazakhstan, from Central Asia, if we want a better future for our countries, we shouldn't allow Russia and China to cause problem in our countries. Thank you.
But specifically about the question around Turkey. So
no, because we said number of times, and unless we don't have a proper maybe committee forum. Thank you for the offering the APPG support. At the moment, millions of refugees from Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan, they need humanitarian support. They need the support of the UNHCR. Because there is no representation. We don't have any single representation in the US Congress, in the UK Parliament, in the EU. We don't have a councillor, we don't have an MP, we don't have the mayor, we don't have the police, nothing. So the only thing that we can do as a small organization with a small income running this kind of events just to inform the public what's going on in our country. I touch on this when the lack of English language is key. And most of the refugees from Afghanistan, they can't speak English properly. How they can contact the UNHCR or maybe other, yes, sorry.
May I offer to everyone in the room an action that we can all take, because you mentioned earlier.
A bit louder, please.
It's
Louder.
It's nice to have an event, but if we don't have an actionable action to take. So here it is. And I will commit myself to doing this, if you all commit to doing this, is to raise the awareness to your MP, to write a letter and to say, we had this event tonight at 5 to 8 p.m. and I attended on behalf, and I'm your constituent, and I would like to raise this to your awareness. If this matters to you and your constituent, will you please attend a event that will be held by
what if they don't reply?
No, sorry, that's why I believe on collaboration, partnership, working together. We shouldn't just rely on this event and say goodbye after the finish. For example, can you imagine Finland is 3 times bigger than UK. The UK government evacuated over 45,000 people from Afghanistan. As a community leader, I'm in touch with some of the new arrived people here in London. I can see that the UK government is still bringing people from Afghanistan, where Finland only evacuated 5,000 people, Norway 6,000 people, Sweden maybe 10,000 people. Sweden, Norway, Finland, they are 3 times bigger than this small island. And that's why I love this country so much. That how they are supportive to the people around the world. So that's why, answering your question about the Russian and Kazakhstan border, we have a very bad experience of the Russian invasion in 1979. We lost 3 million lives after the Russian invasion, only in the north of Afghanistan. Can you imagine? Millions of disabled, widows and orphans.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's time for the Afghan singer as well.
Yeah, we don't have much time.
So is there no more questions?
No, sandwiches.
Yeah, okay. Yes, please.
I guess I wanted to ask about
a bit louder, sorry.
Women who have not had access to education or who have perhaps coming out of Afghanistan, what are the strategies that you guys have been using, and also for the academics, what are future strategies to kind of help them readjust society?
So how to help women, and what was the second one?
Just kind of currently what's being done, and also in the future, that restriction of education and women's opinion to other things continues.
Yeah, my name is Alice Maina, and I'm from the BIM Hub UK network, and we are one of our directors, Ian. I don't know whether I can say it's like comments or observations, or as you talked about the collaboration. We are tackling like collaboration at the moment and extremism and other knife crimes within the UK, and we have a program for young people. And my input is to ask you as an expert of this area, because we also have people from your communities, what kind of intervention that you can maybe bring into our organization, and how can we establish a working relationship, because these things we are integrating, and I'm so impressed to see that banner, that British flag, because we are here. So, and that makes me feel there is a hope. That's because when we are here, we have to adapt this system as well. We can't ignore everything, and that's why we struggle with this self-identity, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we are living in Britain, which makes me feel much better, because we have so many cases sometimes comes, or this approach by the local authorities from the base team. We are all over the UK, but our head office is in Covent.
You must have a lot of money.
Yeah, here in central London. Yeah, but we are based all separately.
Yeah, so the two questions, I think you would be the best person to answer that, was about the women's education in Afghanistan. And then the second one was about working in partnership with other charities.
I think that the only way to improve the situation of the Afghanistan women and refugees in the UK, to set up or maybe to launch a proper mentoring project, which not just at the moment, which have happened in our community. Can you imagine, for example, the majority of people, they never had access to education back home, and they can't write and read in their own language. So how do you expect their children to be educated in the future? And this is my concern, that maybe in terms of what I express my concerns about the lack of representation of the Afghanistan diaspora around the world, it may happen after about 200 years maybe, or maybe 150 years. Because the system is very, very complicated, and the parents, they are not in a position to help their children. Maybe we can talk about mentoring support, and maybe contacting the Home Office and then some other organizations to get some support. Yes.
Would you like to mentor an Afghan woman?
Yeah.
No, you. No, you asked about women. No, you. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm doing a dissertation with you guys on this. So I think I would perhaps want to do something where we kind of, I guess, do some interviews or something with them.
Okay.
No, can you imagine? Sorry, yesterday I was in the office early at 8:30, and I received a telephone call from Brighton. There wasn't anyone in the office. I started the conversation, and it's finishing after 45 minutes. And I realized communication is very important. Maybe in the future, if we receive more money, we should maybe focus on employing someone as a very strong communication officer.
Yeah.
The reason she finished for 45 years, because my conversation was very interesting to this lady. Everything what I was saying, she was listening, and then she said to me, Dr. Nasimi, can you invite you to Brighton? Yeah, to talk about the challenges faced the new arrived people. But anyway, what I was saying, can you imagine, we have English classes Monday to Friday in our center. We have almost between 25 to 40 students. Among 25 to 40 students, only 4 of them from Afghanistan. A refugee came to the UK in 1999, set up the charity with the aim to support the people of Afghanistan. My member of staff, none of them from Afghanistan. And we are an NGO. We don't receive money from the government, begging for money. Then employing Americans, employing Indians. I have a lot of members of staff. Pratichi from India. She was member of staff from Kazakhstan. Hello.
Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Uzbekistan. Yeah. From India, from Pakistan, from America, from Britain, and the volunteers. They are also from the wider community, as well as the beneficiaries. No, the only activities that my people attend, you saw the summer festival, thousands of people. For the music, for the cultural things, they are very good.
Yeah.
When they need help, they started queuing. For example, during the crisis in Afghanistan 3.5 years ago, from 5 a.m. they started queuing. Why? Because the lawyers charge between 10 to 15,000 pounds to bring their families from Afghanistan, and we did it for free. Yeah. So that's why I think that mentoring, support, partnership, collaboration. I feel very sorry because we have one chance in our life. In this world, everyone has a chance in their life. I don't think that when we become old, we will become again young. So what I want to see that some progress, some improvement in the participation of our people in a community life. The improvement in the participation in a community life, the people of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Yeah, just I have.
So yeah.
No, I think that that is finished.
Yeah, I have another job.
It's 8 o'clock.
As Dr. NASIMI mentioned about uneducated people in Afghanistan, there is a reason that Afghanistan is a country of mountain, is a dry land, is a landlocked land, and the people cannot go to the school because there is many problems. And many times we had a war. Around 43 years,
46.
we are in war. Most of the time, the people died fighting with Russia, fighting with the other countries. That is the main reason we are uneducated. Otherwise, we have very good talent. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm an MBS. I have talent for anything. My children, I have 3 children. One of them is a master's degree in computer science. The second one is PhD, and the third one graduate from UCL. This is the people of Afghanistan.
Some years ago, I was at the office of the ACCA, where you had the donation and distributed the laptops to everybody. There is no reason why people cannot be educated, notwithstanding the geography of their country, so long as the government is willing to allow it.
Yeah.
That is the important thing. That's the barrier that has to be broken down. Freedom of access to, and yes, we have a problem. Somebody asked about fake news. Enormous problem about that. But at the end of the day, the only way you really deal with fake news is by giving people access to real news and enabling them to make an informed and educated choice. How do you educate people? If they're in a mountainous area, if they can't get to school, or if there is no school, give them a laptop, give them access to the internet. And you are then beginning to help. Modern technology is an enormous leveler. It's an enormous capacity to actually make people more equal. It's just whether there's a political will to do it.
Shall I take that as your concluding remarks? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, can I take your concluding remarks as well, please?
Thank you very much.
Well, let me answer the 2 questions that were directed to me as a way of concluding. You asked about Palmerston and Trump saying more or less the same thing, that there are no permanent friends, just permanent interests. The point I was trying to make, very inadequately because of lack of time, was about thought, about beliefs. And what they were articulating was the belief that is prominent in the Western world and is now permeated across the globe about realism. It's about power being above principles. Now that doesn't necessarily hold for the rest of the world, it certainly doesn't necessarily hold for the future. Mentioned a multipolar world. The multipolar world is about power. It's either unipolar, one power, or bipolar in the Cold War, or multipolar now. And everybody thinks it's exciting. When was the last time we had a multipolar world? We had a multipolar world just before the First World War. And that's what we are likely to face if you still maintain power over principles. So what I'm trying to say, very inadequately, is that the new generation has to try and reverse that order of power and principles. Your question about radicalization, etc. Again, we must not just take old ideas. I started looking at Al-Qaeda over 25 years ago, even before 9/11. Yes, these people produce very elaborate pseudo-religious narratives that do radicalize people. And some of them, in certain parts of the country, still do. But in the case of Kyrgyzstan, there was virtually no religion, because people had realized that that is, as you pointed out, where people aren't educated religious-wise, where they're poor, how do we motivate them to go out and fight somewhere else that they've got no contact with, that hasn't harmed them? So they came up with this technique which works across cultures, and that is to make men feel that they are not manly if they allow women to be raped and abused by somebody else. So, those ideas of radicalization, those ideas of terrorism are evolving. So we do need to think about all of these issues differently. And the most succinct thing I can say, because I don't have time, I presented on this about 2 weeks ago, is you have to put principles above power. Power must be subordinate to principles. But in the Western world, for reasons that I can bore you with to death, because of enlightenment, because of modernity, we have learned the value of power and subordinated principles to them. And that is what needs reversing.
Thank you very much. So just 2 minutes more.
First of all, I would like to, I forgot to mention this, to express thanks to UCL Kazakh Society. I just came to know about this event day before yesterday when I received a message from Darij. So yeah, I do appreciate the efforts of the UCL Kazakh Society. Thank you so much. So I would just like very briefly give my point on certain questions which I feel like didn't receive answers from academic viewpoint, because there is no academic answer to these questions. For instance, will Russia invade Kazakhstan or not? You see, my personal view is that Russia definitely has this issue on the table, because this is the matter of the World War III, which is already going on in its preliminary stage. So definitely, when you have such a big war, then you need more resources, and of course Russia does not have at the moment many resources which are enough to fight the whole NATO. So definitely this is on the table, and if there's a chance, Russia will definitely invade Kazakhstan, especially northeast part, which is the weakest point. But of course, it all depends on the Kazakhstan's sort of approach in sort of defense, etc. So another point is that many questions about the future of Afghanistan, etc. I just want to point one thing. While studying the theology and history of the Ahmadiyya movement, I came across astonishing facts. 20 years before, in 1883, the founder, he said that there will be two people in Afghanistan, the most saint ones, will be executed by the authorities, and for that, the whole nation will be punished until they repent on the state level. And exactly in 1903, Abdul Latif, Sayyid Abdul Latif, he was the chief of Khost, and he was the most famous saint. He was executed by the Amir of Afghanistan just for one reason, because he accepted Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as the Messiah. This was predicted 20 years before that, and that the punishment will be huge, like incomparable to anything else. And the only solution then when the powers, the authorities in Afghanistan repent on the state level. It does not mean that they have to accept in religious point, just repent for this heinous crime, because he didn't commit any other crime. So, because such questions do not have academic answer, so I just thought it would be pertinent that at least I give some answer, and then everyone has a choice whether to accept or not. Thank you.
So, thank you very much everyone for your participation and for all of the great questions, for the comments, and for taking part in today's event.